Alright, so I think we are finally ready to try and fight this thing back in there. I greased the input shaft spline like the book says, and I put a little bit on the sliding surface of the release bearing as well. So, I've got a shop towel in the open passenger side output shaft flange because we can't put the actual drive flange back in until the transmission is back in the car. So I think everything should be ready to go for us here. According to my Euroshop guide, the reason I had trouble getting it out is because the transmission actually has to rotate back in the car, I believe, back and then up and then rotate to get the differential past the flywheel and the subframe. And he suggested have the engine as low as we can without pulling on any hoses, so that's what I'm going to do. Up in there as it falls off the jack, of course. Don't do that. Manhandle the transmission in? Why not? It's not gonna freaking stay there either. Maybe. Friggin' stay there for a minute. Probably not. I know you guys can't see much, but there really isn't much to see right now except me struggling. But you should be able to see as it comes up through the hole there. Hopefully it's going to start to go here now. I think we are in, more or less. Oh, aside from the power steering line being wedged up in there now. Probably going to cause a problem. I don't know if it fits past there once the transmission's in, so I'll probably figure that out. Anyway, let's get the transmission closer to the engine now. I can do that without dumping it off. Well, that's one bolt started. Man, what a mess. I think we got it. Finally. Let's see if we can tighten those guys in gently and hopefully the rest of it moves with it. Can't remember what size they are. Get off me. This is supposed to be way up here. Pain in the butt. Should be able to. Jack should be doing basically nothing now. Don't do that. All right. Okay. So it's in. Hopefully everything on the spline end of things is good. I don't think it would have gone together if it wasn't. If the spline pushes the clutch disc off center at all, there's no other hole big enough for it to go through, so I would say we're good on that front. And looking in the little window there, you can see the dimple in the clutch fork for the slave cylinder ball end. So I'd say that's okay. Power steering line is okay. So, make sure I haven't forgotten anything else, and then we can start putting the rest of the Bellhousing bolts in, except for the two that hold the starter. There's a crack at the bottom of the Bellhousing right now, probably close to 1/4 inch. So I'm guessing I probably need to loosen off these two bolts while I put those bottom ones in and see if that pulls it in straight. Start doing the reverse of how we took it out. Start putting things back together. It's gonna be pretty hard to film it, so I'll probably just stop here, button it up, and then start up again once the transmission is bolted up to the engine again. And once we get all the Bellhousing bolts in except for the two starter ones, then we should get the engine or transmission mount at this end put back on, and that way we can take the jack out from underneath the car and the engine will be holding its own, and then work on CV axles and the shield for that. Put the starter motor back in, put the clutch slave cylinder back in, put the shifter cables back together, and that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna work away at this. There isn't really much that I can show with the camera working by myself, so I'm gonna work away at this and we'll come back again a little later when we got it buttoned up. So I'm just about to put together the driver's side CV axle here. The reason I'm doing this one now before I've got the rest of the transmission mounts completed is because the gasket that's supposed to be around the joint there that mates to the flange surface was missing. It's broken up inside when I took it apart. So what I'm going to do is I've cleaned the surfaces with a little bit of brake clean on a rag, and I'm just going to put a small bead of the black RTV around there as I put it together. And I'm going to do that now as opposed to once the transmission is up in place, because I won't be able to access this flange like I have it right now. And just while we're here, I figured I'd give you the torque spec for these CV axle bolts. They're M8 diameter on the shaft, on the threads, and for M8 it's 30 foot-pounds, and for M10, if we look at the book here, M8 are 30 foot-pounds and M10 are 52 foot-pounds. So I just took a 8mm wrench and put it around the shaft of the axle flange bolts, and the ones I have are M8. So I'm going to do those to 30 foot-pounds after I put a bead of RTV on there, and then carry on with getting the transmission remounted, torque up the Bellhousing bolts, get the mounts back on, and then I can do the passenger side CV axle as well. So I'm ready to torque up the transmission to engine bolts now, and so we're looking at the O2J transmission. And of course, because they decided to do not only different sizes of bolts but into different materials, we have like 6 different torque values we have to do here, which just makes it more complicated than it needs to be. But anyway, I'm going to leave the starter ones out for now. That's the 2 number 2s on this side, because I'm not putting the starter in yet. I've got the 2 number 1s in the top in, I've got the 3 number 3s in the bottom in, and I've got the 1 additional number 1 towards the back of the block in as well. So for number 1s, we're looking at 59 foot-pounds. So that's the top 2, and this one here that comes through from the engine into the transmission. And then we're looking at number 3, 1, 2, 3 number 3s here, which if we go across here are 44, because they're into aluminum. They're into the oil pan, which is aluminum, so they're a little lower, and they're a little smaller diameter. They're M10s instead of M12s. So I think that's all the numbers I need for right now. 1, 2, 3 number 1s at 59, and 1, 2, 3 number 3s at 44. The number 2s are for the starter. We'll do a little later. They're 59 as well. The number 4s, I don't even know what those are, but I don't have them. Number 4s and number 5, I don't have those bolts. They weren't in there, so I don't know if they're missing or if it's something that mine doesn't have. But they're both 7 foot-pounds if I get to those, if I find them. I don't remember taking them out, so I'd say they're not there. But those are the 2 numbers we need, 59 for the big ones and 44 for the small ones. So I'm going to go ahead and do those. It says to do it in kind of a star pattern, just like you would do any flange or hub. I'm going to do my best. It's kind of hard when you got to go from below the car to above the car and back and forth, but I will step them up in increments. So we're going to do that and then carry on with the engine mounts. So I'm going to just do these torquings in increments like I normally do. We got to do 3 of the big ones at 59 and 3 of the smaller ones at 44. So I'm going to I'll do probably 20 on all of them, and then I'll do 44 on all of them, and then I'll do 59 on the 3 big ones. Alright, that's the transmission torqued to the engine. Now we can put back together this transmission side mount. Got the bracket here. And the bolts. So the manual says for those 3 bolts that hold the actual mount bracket to the transmission, it's supposed to be 37 foot-pounds plus a quarter turn. Well, the plus a quarter turn is supposed to be the stretch factor, and that's for new bolts. And I'm sure it says you're supposed to replace those bolts every time you have them out, so that you can do that quarter turn stretch and they'll be okay. Because these are used, I'm not going to do the quarter turn. I'm going to do 37 and then I might go to 40 or 45. I'll have to see what it feels like. 37 is tons. They're never going to come apart at that. But if you overstretch them, then there's a risk of them breaking while in service, and then your transmission is loose on the engine mount. So I'm going to go ahead and work those up to 37, and depending on how they feel at 37, I might go higher, I might not, but we'll try that much and see what it looks like. I believe there are ways to calculate approximately how much torque you're adding by doing a quarter turn, and it's probably more than I'm doing, but like I said, these are never going to come undone at 45 even. But if you want to be on the safe side, what you should be doing anyways is replacing the bolts, and then you do your 37 foot-pounds plus the quarter turn. And then you know 100% that you're going to be safe, at least to manual specifications. So now we can try to raise up the engine and get it to align for the big bolts here to go in. Give them a little brush. I'm anti-seizing anything that didn't require Loctite. So the flywheel bolts to the engine or to the crankshaft, a little bit of blue Loctite. The spring pack bolts to the flywheel for the clutch, a little bit of Loctite. The axle shafts, the axle, CV axle to the axle flange on the transmission should probably have a little bit of Loctite on them. But you have to make sure that every last bit of oil and grease is cleaned off to be able to put Loctite on, or it's not going to do any good anyway. So let's get the engine and transmission raised up a bit here now. And it should go pretty much right up and in line with where it's supposed to go, more or less. And all you want to try and do when you're putting the bolts in is to not have the bolts pulling up on the transmission as you're tightening them until like the last, quarter of an inch, or you risk damaging the threads in the mount. So I've got it up so that it's basically all the way to the top already. There's a small gap, less than 1/4 of an inch, between the bracket on the transmission and the mount on the car. And I'm going to anti-seize these big bolts here. And they're pretty high. They're like 74 foot-pounds of torque, I believe. I'm going to double check that in a second. But they're pretty high torque for what they are. And in this case, I'm going to put some anti-seize on the head, because that will help with if the bolt does have to pull the transmission up a little bit, it'll be slippery on the bracket then, at least, instead of trying to grab it. And I was able to thread that in all the way by hand, which is what you should be able to do. You shouldn't have to use tools. If you have to use even a ratchet, you probably need to look at cleaning the threads on the bolt or in the mount before you put it together. But yeah, you should be able to thread most fasteners in. You should be able to thread them in by hand with just fingers, no tools. If you can't, like I said, you should probably, and you can usually tell by looking at it when you've got it out whether it's clean. Like these bolts look like brand new from the factory. They've still got the green coating on them. But the anti-seize not only helps with protecting that green coating from salt and corrosion, but it makes guarantee that you can get it out the next time easily with hand tools. You don't even have to use an impact gun or anything. Crack it loose, and as long as you've got the transmission supported, you should be able to wind them out just like I wound them in with my fingers. So I'm just going to double check here. I believe it's 74 foot-pounds for the big bolts. Yeah, 74 foot-pounds for those big ones I just put in. And the little diagonal support bracket that we took off when we were pulling it apart, this guy here, that one and the nut and bolt are 18 foot-pounds. So I need, I think I need 18 for these. Yep. I'm going to use my big torque wrench. Doesn't go as low on the scale, but I trust it more. It starts at 20, but we're going for 74, so it should be okay. Flashlight's in the way. ATCs I'm going to end up with all over my sleeve. Now I am noticing right away that the bolts aren't in the same place on the bracket. So I'm wondering if I should back these off just a little bit so that they'll move. And then I'll lower the jack from under the oil pan. And hopefully that will sit where it's supposed to sit. I'm not going to take it away entirely because I don't want the bolts doing a lot of work until they're tight. It should come out pretty much the same. Oh, battery, don't do that. That's why they tell you to take the battery out. There we go. It's starting to be better. This one's still too tight. That's better. So I gotta do one at a time, looks like, which could be problematic for tightening them, but Alright, so that's the transmission side mount done, other than the support bar there, which I'm not going to do until we get the clutch slave cylinder back in there, so that it's not interfering with us when we're trying to do that. Wheel speed sensor I can actually plug on here right now. I wish I had brought my dielectric grease, but these plugs are pretty good. They're sealed, rubber seal from water. So they're pretty good that way. If you do pull one apart and you notice that there's any kind of corrosion in it, then you should definitely take a little bit of time, clean it out, and then make sure you put some kind of electrical contact grease, dielectric grease on it, so that it'll insulate the connections and also keep dirt and water out of it. So I'm going to go down and do the passenger side CV axle and the pendulum mount and the passenger side CV boot shield, and then we'll come back up here and put together put the starter in, put the slave cylinder in, put the shifter linkage or shifter cable bracket back on and hook up the cables, and put that support bar back in, and then we'll be left with the airbox, which is just one bolt. It's supposed to have two, but it just has one right now. And then I think what I'm going to do as well while we're here in the shop is I'm going to do the vacuum pump O-ring seal, which is what I initially thought was the oil leak I was dealing with. And you can't see it on camera there, but there's quite a bit of oil sludge underneath, like it's been slowly leaking, which isn't a big deal. It keeps the engine from rusting. But if it gets to the point that you're losing any kind of amount of oil, or there's a visible drip on the ground if you don't have a belly pan, then you need to look into doing that. The reason I had to do the rear main seal is we were losing so much oil that I had to put oil in every time I go to drive it, so I don't want to deal with that. So I'm going to do the bottom side wrap up, and then we'll come back up here and get the top put together, and then that'll be just about it for this job.
So yeah, that'll wrap it up here for the first of two parts here on the kind of the wrap up of the rear main seal project that we've been doing now for the last few weeks. It was a little longer than normal. That's because there was a lot of content to cover in this video, and I hope that it helps you guys out if you're ever doing transmission installation on these Jettas. Anyway, if you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Visit gbproductions.ca. Follow us on Twitter at gbproductions6, and follow us on Instagram at gbproductions1. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.